Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Hall. Averie Swanson of Keeping Together is on the show this week in a conversation recorded last month at Funk Fest in Nashville. We're going to be talking about Saison, building a new brewery, and the creative process. And she's coming up in just a moment. But first, please go visit allaboutbeer.com. There, you can find original articles, reviews, news, insights, and podcasts. You can listen to shows like Beer Travelers, Brewer to Brewer, and the All About Beer podcast simply by searching All About Beer wherever you listen to shows. This show and all of the work we do, it's supported by you. Please go visit patreon.com/allaboutbeer to help keep the content fresh. A few bucks goes a long way to fund writers, photographers, creators, and editors. And there's even a pro tier for all of you breweries and beer-related companies out there. And if you'd like to learn more about advertising on this show, please email info@allaboutbeer.com. All right, one last time for this year, let me give praise to Funk Fest. Linus Hall and Brandon Jones are two brewers that I've known for years, and they put real thought into creating a tasting event that focuses on spontaneous fermentation, but still makes way for other delightful beers and beverages. Jones asked me to host a series of panels during the festival, casual conversations with leading brewers on a variety of topics. This week, I am so pleased to welcome back to the show Averie Swanson of Keeping Together. Swanson is one of the most talented and thoughtful brewers in the U.S. today, and her career path is well known. Going from a volunteer at Jester King in Austin, Texas, to its head brewer in just 4 years, before leaving several years ago to start a new venture called Keeping Together. Originally, it was operating out of Chicago and focused on mixed culture, rustic, and Belgian-inspired beers. Now, she and her partner, Pat Fahey, have purchased a property in New Mexico and plan to open a brewery and tasting room. Over the last year, she's been thinking about new iterations of her beers, specialty ingredients, becoming part of a new community, and the experiences that come with new beginnings and space. Here's our conversation.
Yeah. Thanks. Is this thing on?
So natural. Yeah.
Is it on?
I don't know how the wheels came off this quickly, but apparently it did.
Me neither. I was like, they're going to put me at the end so that everyone's drunk, and it's like the pressure is no longer on.
So for those who are out and people are going to be filtering back in, we are recording this for the podcast so people can listen in later on. But it started with Vinny, who had one of his Pomace beers that was like a 9 or 10%. And then he brings in Pliny, which is like 8%, that I didn't realize that the ABV was that high on it. And then Garrett Oliver shows up and starts pouring a 9% beer. And now here I am sitting with you, and I'm desperately trying to keep my focus.
Yes.
Before all of the alcohol. So it's how are you?
I'm okay.
Yeah.
We'll bring you down gently. This beer is probably around 6% ABV.
Perfect. See,
so
all
that's
right.
a positive.
All right, so tell us what we're drinking so that we can get into this conversation.
Okay, so this beer is called Preoccupied with Memory and Expectation. It is a mixed culture fermented Saison of sorts made with burnt honey, Japanese red shiso leaf, and dry hopped with Sabro, which is my least favorite hop ever. It is truly a terrible hop. Why do people hate Sabro? Because it's diacetyl adjacent. It tastes like pre-digested popcorn.
Why are you putting it in your beer then?
Because I wanted it to taste like coconut. So the reason why I made this beer...
It sounds counterintuitive, like, yeah. I don't like this. This is garbage hop.
Yeah.
I put it in my beer. Yeah.
So, okay. So, like I said, the name of this beer is Preoccupied with Memory and Expectation. I named it that.
I'm going to ask you about the name. Yeah.
Yeah. So way back when I was head brewer at Jester King, I made a beer with a friend of mine, Ben, at Gigantic Brewing in Portland, Oregon.
Ben Love.
Yeah, Ben Love. And we had been to Japan a year prior for a beer festival in the mountains there. And we wanted to make a beer using some of the ingredients that we encountered on our travel there. And so we made a beer using Japanese shiso leaf, which is an herb kind of in the mint and basil family that is used to color umeboshi plums. Sometimes it'll be used to color pickled ginger. So it has kind of like a deep red magenta type pigment to it. So we used a beer or made a beer using that ingredient, and the final product ended up having this really interesting coconut-like flavor to it that I attributed to the shiso leaf, and I'm still pretty certain it came from the shiso leaf. Regardless, I decided that I wanted to try to make a beer using this ingredient, and my expectation was that it would end up tasting kind of like that coconut flavor that we created in that other beer.
Okay.
So I made the beer, slaved over a hot stove, burning honey for a few hours, and
so this is purposefully burnt honey.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, just kind of.
How long does it take to burn honey?
I was using a very inefficient stove top, so it took a couple hours. But you basically want to just reduce it down. You get a fair amount of like caramelized flavor and aroma from this process. So I ended up using that in the final beer for re-fermentation. But I added the Japanese shiso leaf, fully expecting it to impart some sort of coconut-like flavor. And in the finished beer, or while it was still in tank, I was like, it has no coconut at all whatsoever. And so I ended up seeking out the help of Sabro hops, which, like I said earlier, are really kind of a terrible hop.
Yeah.
The like flavor descriptors for it from the hop companies are like sweet cream and butter, which are flavors that you generally don't want in your hops.
Yeah, you kind of want to avoid that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I used a very, very small amount. It was like half a pound per barrel of a dry hop, which for the
so you were
hop
hoping
heads,
to get
I was hoping to get some of that coconut.
Did you?
I do feel like early on it did present with a little bit of the coconut. At this point, I feel like it's fairly integrated in the final product. Using adjunct ingredients in a pretty subtle way is very much a, I don't know, I guess it's my shtick. I don't necessarily want ingredients to hit you over the head. I think there's plenty of beer out there in the world that will bludgeon you with flavor.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily feel like I need to do that. So I really enjoy using adjunct ingredients in a subtle way to create layers of flavor and to allow people to use some of their imagination, which I think is an underutilized muscle these days, to kind of fill in between the lines. And I really like that approach to beer. And given that the beer is mixed culture fermentation, it's packaged with live yeast, the beer will continue to change over time. So if I give it some starting points, I have found over the years of doing this that a lot of times with herbs and spices, things will bloom over time as their flavor active components are kind of unlocked through secondary fermentation in the bottle over time. So
we're at the point in the fest today where people have been drinking for a while and the crowd noise has ratcheted up.
Yeah.
So I can hear you, but I can't fully hear. What is an underused muscle these days in beer?
Humans' imaginations.
Tell me more about that. Why you think that to be true?
I feel like people, so you go and you order a beer and it's like, yeah, it's made with cherries and cinnamon and vanilla. And if you can't taste the vanilla, you're disappointed in this beer because the vanilla isn't slapping you across the face with its intensity. That, for me, I just like philosophically do not agree with that approach to beer making. I think that you can use ingredients in a subtle way and it can still be extremely interesting. But I've had people be like, if it's on the label, I want to be able to taste it. And I can appreciate that perspective to a certain extent. But like, as a consumer, you're not like, oh, if I don't taste the vanilla, I didn't get my money's worth. Like, that's probably not why you're buying the beer. But a lot of people just like don't want to put in the work to explore their sensory experience in a really present way, I feel like. So
Okay.
I don't know. I would rather tickle somebody's imagination with some flavor ingredients and see what they find in the final product themselves.
How hard is that conversation to have these days?
Well, I'm having it right now.
I know, but
and
but we're at this
people
point
are staring out kind of.
Yeah, but we're at this point where, somebody says, oh, this is Pliny the Elder with guava puree, and they want to be able to
Vinny,
taste
are you making that?
One more time and it becomes true. Gotta say it 3 times the trend. But they want to be hit over the head with the flavor, and that, it's the same thing. Like when I walk I have a 6-year-old now, and I walk the breakfast cereal aisle, and it is exactly what, and I didn't think about this when I was a kid, but now that I'm buying for her, it is, this tastes like, cinnamon, or this tastes like birthday cake. Everything tastes like birthday cake these days. And we know it's just vanilla, and it's just sugared vanilla. But like,
And if it doesn't taste like that, or it doesn't taste like the birthday cake that I want, like, I'm disappointed when I'm eating the breakfast cereal that I'm ostensibly buying for her, but I'm actually going to eat at the end of the night. But how hard is that conversation, though, with beer, then, when you're talking about burnt honey, and you're talking about these sweets, and you're talking about all of these things, and unless, like, I don't know, I can imagine what burnt honey tastes like, but I don't know if I've ever purposefully had it.
Yeah.
So how is that conversation?
I would say more often than not, it's challenging. A lot of beer people don't really get it or care or have the attention span to indulge me in conversations like this, but there are a lot of people that do get it. And so for me, it's not necessarily about how hard is that conversation. It's about choosing when and where I want to engage people to have that conversation.
Okay.
Like, I would much rather talk about things like this at a curated festival. Like, I feel like this is one that would make sense, right? People are here because they want interesting and funky beers.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I would rather be a little bit more selective with my audience than try to get people who really just want to get wasted on 15% triple IPA. Like, they're not here for that kind of beer. And the thing is, there's plenty. It's just like beer is like music. I don't have to listen to all the music that exists out there. I can kind of pick and choose what I like, and that's, I don't know. You don't have to drink all of it. There are enough people out there that have, interesting palates that are looking for specific flavors, and I'd rather make beer for a small subset of people who get it and who are excited about it, because that fuels what I do.
Yeah, and that's a cool thing about your brewery, and I think a lot of the producers that are here at FunkFest today, by and large, they are making it for the people who get it or the people who want it, as opposed to trying to be something for everybody, and that model works in beer.
Yeah.
But there is something to be the conversation about nuance, the conversation about, yeah.
I don't know. Like I said, I feel like I've been fortunate to pour beer at a lot of really unique festivals across the world. And there are many festival organizers that have done a good job of curating their audience. So, like, obviously, I don't want to make Saison just for Saison drinkers and no one else. Like, I would love to see people converted to this subculture of Saison. So I really appreciate...
When did Saison become a subculture? Like, why isn't it mainstream?
Has it ever been mainstream?
But why isn't it mainstream?
Because a lot of people in the States don't want beer with, like, nuance. And I would make the argument, too, that there are a lot of popular American Saisons that are they're all made with the same strain of yeast, and so they all kind of taste the same. You've had Tank 7, you've had probably 50% of all of the mass-produced Saison in the country, because it all will taste more or less the same. And that's not to say that I don't appreciate Tank 7. I have enjoyed it on many occasions. But I think, with IPA, there's certainly a ton of depth and complexity there if you care enough to look for it and if you're paying attention to your sensory experience. But people can make, 2 IPAs using the exact same hops, but they'll still taste a little bit different because there's process stuff that you can do to change their flavor profiles. And with Saison, it's the exact same way, but so many brewers are like, well, if I'm going to make Saison, I'm just going to use this yeast. I'm going to stress it the hell out, and, Saison, it'll be fine. And people just don't, I don't know, they're not necessarily looking for the nuance there.
How do you approach making a Saison? Where does your brewer mind, when you're conceiving putting something together in the Saison realm, where do you start, and walk me through that?
That's a great question.
That's why I'm here.
It really kind of depends. I feel like I have a few different types of approaches to making beers and to recipe development. Growing up as a young brewer at Jester King, I felt like I was very resource oriented. It was very like, okay, well, we have all of this grain. There are certain types of grain. We have these certain other adjunct ingredients that are available right now because it's the season. So you kind of base recipes around what is available to you. And in my mind, the romantic philosophical idea of Saison or farmhouse beer generally being very resource oriented, like you're making this beer on the farm, you had an excess of rye, you're going to throw some of that rye in your beer, right?
Yeah.
You're not necessarily like, I'm trying to recreate the exact same beer every year. So I still very much feel like I have a resource-oriented approach to recipe development. For instance, when I was making beer at Half Acre which is where I started keeping together in Chicago, Illinois, they are a 50,000 barrel a year brewery. They are a huge production brewery at this point. And one of I was looking at the inventory, and they had 1 bag of Maris Otter, and I talked to left over from a recipe. And I talked to the production manager, and I was like, hey, what is up with this 1 bag? And he was like, oh my God, do you want it? Please take that bag. I do not. It is cluttering up my inventory. Just this one thing. I can't use it for anything else. And I was like, all right, Maris Otter. And I was like, I'm going to make a British-inspired Saison with Earl Grey tea, dried lemons, and saffron. So there was I would have never come up with that beer probably without having had that one tiny starting point, which is kind of obscure and strange, but I don't know. It's an interesting process. It's not always that way. There are definitely times where I'm out and about and have a cocktail, and I'm like, this is a really interesting flavor experience. How could I recreate this in a beer? So
how often does that work?
It works. I like to think that it works more often than it doesn't.
Okay.
But it's not, if I were to do that, it's not like I'm trying to recreate the cocktail itself. I'm trying to recreate the experience of enjoying that cocktail in a certain place with friends. And so there's more than just the flavors of the cocktail that go into the beer, right? Like if I'm having a Mai Tai on a beach somewhere, which sounds pretty amazing right now, I would...
I mean, no knocking our hosts here in beautiful
not.
Middle Tennessee.
Of course not. I love it here. But who's going to deny that a Mai Tai on a beach somewhere...
Sure, yeah.
Sounds great. So if I were to do that, it would be...
Funkfest Beach Edition.
Yeah.
I feel like that
sounds great. Next year, for
Next
sure.
year.
We're not that far from the beach here, right?
Linus can put that together. That's fun. Yeah.
But, if I were trying to recreate that in beer form, it would be... I'd probably do some cherry, maybe some rum barrels. I would probably add some mint, but I would also want to use salt because I was on a beach and I could smell the ocean and the ocean breeze and, the sunscreen on my body and things like that. Like, it's not just the cocktail I'm trying to recreate. It's the holistic experience.
And that to me is, so I get the question, I'm sure you get the question all the time as well, of, what's the best beer you ever had? And I have answers to that, but it is very rarely about the beer itself,
Totally.
But it's who I was with, it's why it was tasting a certain way, it's where I was at any given moment kind of thing. So when you're thinking about the beers that you put out and you want those beers to evoke a sense of place, but then also probably be enjoyed in a place that will evoke a good memory, is there a way as a brewer you're able to not force that conversation, but maybe encourage that to, maybe don't open it up in your basement while you're on Beer Advocate. I don't know if people still do that. I don't know if dial-up is still a thing, but how much do the location of where your beer is consumed?
I mean, honestly, I'm not trying to incept people's minds completely. I want to, if you're ever hanging out with friends and you're trying to tell them a story, they're never going to be able to fully experience the story that you're telling them, but you can communicate as well as you can how you felt when you experienced that story, right? And so with the beers, it's kind of the same thing. I'm not trying to force people to feel exactly how I feel or experience that beer exactly how I experienced it. I would so much rather give them a starting point in their own experience so that they can fill in between the lines and create something new, like a fractal memory, if you will. Kind of I don't ever expect every person that has my beer to have the exact same sensory experience.
Right.
Everything is tied into your personal memory. And I don't know, I love when people come up to me and they're like, I had that beer and I totally saw where you were coming from, but it reminded me of this thing that I experienced. That to me is amazing. And what we as humans are here to do is to share our experiences with one another. So if I can make beer that is thoughtful and interesting and kind of piques people's curiosity and tickles their imagination so that those types of conversations can be had. That to me is a far more interesting landscape of beer than the alternative. I'm done.
No,
also,
you're in the process of. Please don't be done. You're in the process of putting down roots for keeping together. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll provide folks with a little bit more backstory before I go forward.
Doesn't everybody know your bio and your backstory?
I don't know.
You have one of the more storied career paths, I think, than most.
Really?
Yeah.
I love that. I don't know. I'm just a girl trying to make some Saison.
Trying to bring Saison mainstream. Yeah.
I tried with smoked beer actually for a while, and then I was like, no one's listening to me because John Hall hasn't gotten on board yet. And then you started Camp Rauch Beer.
This week in Rauch Beer, the most important podcast dedicated to. Yeah.
Do you not remember the last time we did a podcast?
Yes.
And I was like, smoked beer is the next hazy IPA, and you were like, I don't know.
I'm not convinced. You were talking about your lavender smoked malt.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I have on my list to actually bring up of what Caleb's doing and down at Sugar Creek and all of that as well. All right, but yes, please.
So I started keeping together in Chicago in 2019. I moved up there from Austin, and I had been working with Half Acre doing a bit of consulting for their wild program, which honestly didn't need any consulting. They wanted to scale it a little bit, but this is pre-pandemic, and I don't think they ever ended up scaling that program. But they were like, yeah, if you're here, you want to make some beer, we've got extra tank space. We'd love to have you here in a greater capacity. So I started keeping together out of their original brew pub in North Chicago and did that for about 3 years. And then I love Chicago. My dad was born and raised there. It's a very familiar feeling place to me. However, I am a Texan born and raised, and I love the heat and I love the sunshine. And I was like, I need to get back to more southern latitudes. So almost exactly 1 year ago.
The winters are mostly better in Texas.
Most of the time, yeah. It's kind of erratic these days. But, and
we
the
don't
summer,
have to get into it. Yeah,
the summertime is definitely kind of hot and sweaty and whatever. But I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is quite high in elevation. The weather is fantastic. It's 7,200 feet in elevation. And the weather is... honestly is perfect. The highs in the summer like 95, but there's a huge diurnal shift, so it's like 60, low 60s at night.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah. It's perfect.
Open the windows and just go say, I just want to take a nap now.
Yeah.
Oh man,
it's great. Right. And winters are nice too. There's snow in the desert is quite gorgeous. I'm not a snow person. Snow and I don't really see eye to eye. As a Texan, I can't do that, but it is pretty in the desert, so I tolerate that. But I really love it there. My partner and I are currently under contract to purchase a piece of property for a permanent location for keeping together there. We will, if all goes accordingly, it'll probably be a year before we're open. So, and things have already not gone accordingly.
Sure.
But so that year keeps getting pushed back.
I was going to say, when everybody is like, oh yeah, we're going to be open by Memorial Day. It's like, cool, can't wait for Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. But Santa Fe is a really interesting place. There's maybe 8 or 9 breweries in Santa Fe proper. In New Mexico total, there's like 100 breweries. And so moving there from Chicago, where there's like 250 breweries in the greater metropolitan area, was kind of shocking. But it's awesome. I feel like it feels like the beer industry 10 years ago. Like everyone is still really excited about what they're doing. Both brewers making beers and consumers drinking beers. Like there's Scotch ale all over the place. It's amazing.
It's like going to Montana where it's all like malt edge. I remember the first time I went to Montana, it's like every bar has a Scotch ale on tap, and I kind of love it. And
it takes
like
me
I'm
back.
Here for it. Yeah.
Like people are still happy about beer. It's awesome.
You've been exploring the New Mexico brewing culture, and now you're going to become a part of it.
I hope so, yes.
Since you've decided to put roots down there, how has the idea of the brewery changed in your mind or evolved in your mind?
That's a great question. I mean, honestly, the brewery started with such a kind of transient and kind of like ethereal philosophy behind it that I don't feel like there's been a whole lot in the way of challenge, like philosophically moving the brewery from one place to another. There were plenty of people that were like, what do you mean you're just going to move the brand over? You're not going to like start something new or, you know, like it started there. It's a Chicago brand. And like, it was never really intended to be that way. Like, I don't even have a set logo, you know, it's a very elastic brand by intention. And so part of me feels like there hasn't really been a whole lot of change as far as what I want to see the brand become.
Yeah.
I've always wanted it to be a very experiential type of brand and product, I guess, which I feel like is kind of a soulless word for it. But I want to make things that inspire people and help people look inward.
I don't think that's. It's more like based in reality, though.
Yeah,
of
it
just, is. And you have to think about it that way.
Definitely.
Sometimes you have to be cold about the way that we think about.
Well, it is very much a business,
yes.
And you know, I've been running the business by myself for the last 3 years, and so that stuff isn't so much lost on me. But it is. I don't know. I don't want to forget why I'm doing this, and I'm not doing it because I'm gonna retire rich someday.
What's the old joke of how do you make a small fortune in beer? Start with a large one.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's very real. I've seen it happen to a lot of people.
Same thing with journalism. Yeah.
Yeah, we've all got lofty ideas, and reality sucks. But
what is the biggest part of reality that is bumming you out these days?
Great question. Okay, so I mentioned,
and then I'm going to ask the flip side of that.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to, you know.
Probably just that like stuff takes time, and there are moments when I'm like super impatient and I'm ready to be making beer again, and it's going to take me a year before I'm making beer again, and I don't necessarily want to go cook in someone else's kitchen again. Not that I had a bad experience doing it before, because I could not have asked for a better partner to do that with in Half Acre. But I don't know, I don't want to move into a new place and feel like a guest, I guess. I want to be able to integrate myself into the community in a more, I don't know, authentic and real and lasting way.
Yeah.
So I would say that the part of reality that's bumming me out is that everything takes time and I got to be patient. But the flip side of it is that this has been such an incredible learning experience for me and my partner. I wouldn't change that part for anything. And kind of in between like leaving Jester King and starting Keeping Together in Chicago, I've had like a 6-month sabbatical type of experience where I wasn't making any beer. And I left JK because I was burnt out and I needed like some time. I needed to spend time with family. And that, like, I was having a hard time like feeling creative and coming up with recipes and feeling like I was, I don't know, being fulfilled by this thing that used to fulfill me.
Yeah.
And so that period of time away from what I was doing helped tremendously with that issue. Like, I was able, when I started KT, I had a laundry list of beers I wanted to make that I was excited about. And I am very much in that place now where I am very excited to make beer again. And I've got a list of ingredients and a list of recipes. And I'm very much looking forward to having a brewery again.
That being able to step away a little bit, to take a sabbatical. I know that there are breweries that encourage that after people have been around for a while. But having lived through that, does the industry need more of that? Or do people in general just need more of that?
I think people in general probably just need more of that. We are all like truly living in a rat race all the time, and that is not what we're here to do. You know, like, I'm sure everyone's seen the memes of like, don't glorify the grind life or the hustle, like glorify whatever this is. And it's like chipmunks drinking tea by the river or whatever. Y'all seen those memes?
Yes.
That's what I'm here for that. Like, life is short, man. And we rush through everything. Like, how many of you remember how good the food was the last time you ate something? You know, like, what was it? Can you tell me in detail what it tasted like? Most people are not paying attention. You know, like, you live through your life kind of like 1 foot in and 1 foot out, thinking about what's next or what's behind us, we're all preoccupied with memory and expectation, and it's no way to live. Like, we truly only have this moment right now.
Yeah. Talk to me about how you name your beers. Are all the short names taken?
Yes, that's absolutely part of it.
So I've been drinking Piney for 3 hours now. Yeah.
Bless his heart, as we say here in
Bless
Nashville.
his heart, yeah. It's my liver that needs the help
bless
right
his
now.
liver
Yeah,
also. So the naming stuff, I really enjoy that part, honestly. Some of the beers are like conceived through the name. Like, I'll come up with a good name and I'm like, what would that name taste like as a beer? And then other times it's like, okay, here's this beer. This happened while I was making it. This is the name. I'm sure some of you have had the other beer that I'm pouring inside called At the Still Point of the Turning World, which is from a T.S. Eliot poem. And that beer, it's a buckwheat and rye Saison made with Old World and New World hops. And I made it with Richard Price, who is one of the owners of Scarpment Labs up in Ontario.
Yeah.
He's awesome.
Yeah, he's been on
brilliant.
the Old Up Your podcast.
Yes, he's truly one of the most brilliant minds. And is a good friend, and I'm very grateful for him. He banks the Saccharomyces, that is the base of my mixed culture. And so I had him come down to Chicago to make that beer with me. We brewed it on Friday the 13th of March 2020, which was the day...
That's the day everything shut down.
The day Chicago shut down,
Yeah,
the
New
day
York
the world
was-
changed
Yeah.
for all of us. And, we had already set up what we wanted the beer to be. It was going to be an Old World and New World Saison. And little did we know that day was the still point of the turning world, and it was the day the old world ceased to exist and the new world began. And so I discovered that poem after we had made the beer, and I was like, that's the name. That's a perfect name for it. So I don't know. I really like I think that words are incredibly important, and I'm probably way too getting way too philosophical for this
words
drunk
are
festival
important.
right now.
As somebody who deals in words, yes, words are incredibly important. But somebody will say to me later on, like, "Oh, what was that beer that you were drinking during your Averie conversation?" And I'm like,
You're not going to remember.
I have no idea,
and that's okay.
But how often does that happen?
It happens a lot. And I remember that happening even when I was with Jester King and we would like pour beer at festivals, like omniscience and proselytism. I was like, no one can say this beer name at these beer festivals.
Especially after a couple of rounds, yeah.
Yeah, and so people would be like, I want the omnipotent and precious. And you're like, what? And you're like, if you can't read the name, I can't serve you. Should probably be cut off.
Most people on their best day can't make those pronunciations.
No, of course not.
But yeah,
that's just kind of an egregious example, honestly. But I don't know. I'm less about wanting people to remember exactly what the name was and remember that beer, and more like, when you see that on the menu, I want to hear you say those words out loud. That is a form of inception. I want to hear you say, let's see, make art, not content.
Yeah.
Say that a couple times out loud. Create a mantra for yourself.
Is that your brewery's mantra?
Make art, not content.
Yeah. Does your brewery have a mantra?
It is thoughtful beers for an ecstatic reality would be the catchphrase.
Okay.
I haven't trademarked it though, so y'all be nice.
We got about 3 weeks. We got about 3 weeks before this airs, and I'm sure that there's somebody who listens to these things and just goes and starts buying URLs, and it's usually Rob Fulmer out at the Arizona Brewers Guild who's.
Yeah, I don't know. My dad and I were very close. He passed away in 2012. Too young. I was definitely too young, but he was. He was born and raised in Chicago. He was, he was in Vietnam during the war. He came back and was very much a hippie and a hypnotist and a Buddhist. And
like a professional hypnotist?
Yeah. Yeah. I have like articles of that were written about him when he was in the army, like hypnotizing some of the other army people, like the other privates in his battalion or whatever. I clearly have not been in the military, but you know what I mean? I like have these articles written about him. He loved that. He was into like NLP and all that stuff. And I think that very much, I inherited all of his books and inherited a lot of his, I guess, perspective on the world prior to him dying. But I don't know, that has very much influenced how I approach the things that I'm creating. So I don't know. If I have an opportunity to put words in someone's mouth, I want them to be positive and like uplifting, or at least make them think about something.
You were talking about tickling the imagination before. You brought it up twice earlier. Is there... I'm guilty of this by nature of my profession and living and growing up in New Jersey, but as a cynic. Is beer suffering from a positivity problem these days?
Probably.
Because every time I talk to you, you are this like force for positivity, this force for light, and and then like I talk to other people and it's just everything's terrible and everything sucks, and then like we talk and you're like, Rauch beer is going to be the next thing, and I'm like, of course it's not, and then I go and buy the URL and
exactly.
I trademark
You're
it,
welcome.
and I don't think that's how that conversation went, by the way, but I've been proven wrong on multiple occasions, and I'm happy to do that way. But like, you're a realist, obviously,
yes.
but like you also just seem to have a sunnier than most,
I appreciate you saying that, because I don't necessarily always feel that way. It doesn't come without it definitely requires energy sometimes. But I don't know. For the most part, I am very energized by this industry, and I do think that I'm primarily it's because of all the amazing people that I've met, like both as peers, people that make beer or work in beer, but also everybody that like comes out and enjoys beer at festivals. I have met so many incredibly interesting people, like Scott over here, who I met at a beer festival. I met you, I think, at Fresh Craft, maybe in Asheville, like at the bottle shop.
Who's Scott?
Scott is over here, but he's
Hi, Scott.
He was just like there, like enjoying beer, and I was like, this guy is incredibly interesting, and I've like never forgotten him.
Yeah,
and that was like fucking 8 years ago. I'm sorry I cursed on
that's fine
on record, but. No. But truly, like, I remember seeing him at like Shelton Brothers Atlanta years after I met him. These memories are not, I don't know. I love what I do, and I love this industry, and I love everybody that I've met through this. There have definitely been some assholes out there.
Sure.
But, I
65% asshole free?
Yeah, but I would so much more prefer to just like focus on the positive stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you are not in control of your life, but you are in control of the way that you frame what you experience.
I've paid you a lot of compliments, and I continue to do so, but I think there are a new generation of brewers that have come up behind you that look to you as an example of ways to do things the right way and do things with purpose.
That's crazy. Bless them.
Bless their livers. Who are you looking to these days for inspiration? Who do you continue to look to?
Oh, man. Honestly, there are a lot of people in the, like, do you mean in the industry specifically?
I have no qualifications on that question.
Oh, man, there are a lot of people in the industry that I think are doing really incredible things, and are just, like, for lack of, well, I'll just be, like, trite and say, like, they're living their truths. I hate that phrase, but honestly, people that are just, like, making the beer that they want to make and are not really out there pandering to people. Like, honestly, I think about somebody like Ashley at Bierstadt.
Yeah, Ashley Carter. Yeah.
I love her dearly, and I think that she makes some incredible beer, and she's just, like, doing her fucking thing. And I very much respect her for that. Obviously, lager has become a really popular trend over the last few years, which I think is great and necessary.
Yeah.
But, like, and so there are a lot of people that have hopped on that bandwagon. And we've had some really amazing lagers produced through that. But there are a lot of people that are making bad beer. And it's like, I'm not going to just, like, chase trends and make what everyone else is making because people say that I'm not going to make any money otherwise. Like, I don't know. That sounds terrible to me. So I think about people like her. I don't know, other people that are doing really interesting, like, where is the innovation right now in beer?
So where are you looking for innovation right now? How do you want to lead that conversation? Because I every time I talk to you, you're always introducing me to new ingredients that I've never thought about in the beer space. And you're not afraid of adjuncts. You're not afraid of adding things to your beer.
I'm afraid of some things.
Okay. What are you afraid of?
I tasted a beer yesterday. I'm here also judging World Beer Cup. I had a beer yesterday with cream cheese powder. And that made me sad. I mean,
I'm going to introduce you to Augie Carton in a few minutes.
Oh, I've talked with Augie on the podcast before.
He's talked at you on the podcast?
He's talked at me on the podcast before.
Yeah. 8 long years of my life.
I mean, yeah.
I don't know how I do it, but yeah. He made a cream cheese powdered beer, and I was like, this is...
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I love cream cheese.
Yeah.
But...
it's all about...
And it came through.
But it fattens the tongue.
Beer,
it's
crazy.
that fat on the tongue though that it shows up as.
Oh
and
yeah,
it's
it was
weird.
so slick.
Yeah,
it was slick. But I don't know. I think about like, is that do we consider that to be innovation, or do we consider that to be like trend following and like novelty? Like, how do you, John? How do you define innovation versus novelty? Like, where is the line there?
It's like porn. You know it when you see it.
Porn?
Yeah, like it's like that's the old line, right? Of like, you know, like what is pornography? It's like I don't know, but I know it when I see it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? Am I wrong on that? I feel like that's a phrase. Like, you know, like
people are
all
nodding.
The middle-aged
People are
white
nodding.
dudes are like, I care about it. We don't know anything about that. But
we all know about that.
Innovation for me is always I when I'm talking to brewers and they are finding cool things to do with established ingredients. I was talking to Chris Cates from Little Animals earlier, and he's doing some cool things with malt these days.
Yeah.
You've done cool things with malt as well. Like you call up Caleb and you're like, hey, how do I get lavender smoked malt?
Honestly, he brought that to me. He was already doing
but
cool
that to
stuff.
me is innovation, though, right?
Totally.
I mean, it's not like, oh, we have Sabro and this tastes like coconut, but it actually just tastes like spoiled sweet cream or like whatever
diacetyl adjacent.
Diacetyl it is.
Yeah.
So I think innovation comes from thinking about things that are already established and then looking at them through the prism of...
Totally.
And your beers do that.
Yeah. There's like a website blog kind of thing that I've read over the years that I really love. It's called Brain Pickings.
Grain Pickings?
Brain Pickings.
Sorry, I hear grain and I'm just...
No, I mean, that's topical.
It's where we are, yeah.
But one of the things that this woman says on her podcast or on this blog is like everything is a remix. So it's not necessarily... We can't come up with something new out of thin air for the most part, right? That's definitely not going to happen all the time. But we can take things that have already been done and blend those things with other experiences that we have to create something novel. So I do think that there is some... I agree with you completely. Like thinking about old ingredients or old processes through a new lens and trying to create something new from those things, I think very much qualifies as innovation.
So where are you putting your brain towards that these days?
It's a good question. Honestly, like going from Texas to Chicago and seeing some of the interesting ingredients available to me there that I didn't have in Texas, like rhubarb. Rhubarb does not grow in Texas, but it very much is a thing in the Midwest and colder climates. So I was really excited about like using ingredients
put it in
like
pies.
that.
Yeah.
Like strawberry rhubarb is very much a classic combo.
Just got Jason from Orpheus all upset, but yeah, that's fine.
I'm sorry.
But yeah.
Jason,
Jason, why don't you like rhubarb?
You don't like rhubarb? I like it too.
The wheels have come off, yeah.
So like weird ingredient I didn't have access to in Texas. I was excited about that. So moving to New Mexico, there's all kinds of crazy stuff, different ingredients to work with. So I'm excited about that. So I've been learning about like botanical ingredients and like bitter roots and stuff like that, like desert microflora and macroflora, I guess.
Yeah.
All kinds of like cool stuff that grows out there. So that's definitely like piquing my interest and my curiosity and my kind of creative muscle for that. Like I am very much a write down flavor combo kind of so I've got like a notebook of all kinds of weird stuff that I'd like to do in the future. But so I don't know, having new ingredients and kind of a new landscape to explore has been really cool and fodder for creative output, I guess.
I'm excited for you and 2025 and the brewery. I hope it's before then.
I do
but
too.
I'm trying to be.
I do too, but it'll definitely be 2024, like at the earliest.
Is this going to be a proper place that we can come and visit?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, that has very much been one element of what I've been doing with Keeping Together that I have very much missed. Like at Jester King, I had I painted the tap room there, like I painted the bathroom there as a young apprentice, free labor. I am very excited to be able to create a holistic experience for people and like design a space for people to experience and not just the beers. So I'm very much excited about being able to create a taproom experience for people to come and hang out and tell me what they taste in the beer. So
I'm excited to come visit.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this. Thanks
for having me.
Out.
This was awesome.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
Go enjoy your last hour of the festival, and thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Yeah. My thanks again to Linus and Brandon. Questions, comments, concerns, you can email me. It's John Hall. That's JOHNHOLL at allaboutbeer.com, or you can tell me about it on Twitter at John_Hall. A reminder, go visit allaboutbeer.com. There you can check out the podcast page, the merch page, and can read great new content as well as the archives going back to 1979. You can follow All About Beer on social media at All About Beer. And if you're interested in supporting journalism in the beer space, and really I hope you are, email us at info@allaboutbeer.com or go to patreon.com/allaboutbeer. Don't forget, All About Beer has a podcast channel now. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. For you smoked beer fans out there, check out This Week in Rauch Beer. The Facebook group is easy to search, and on Twitter and Instagram, we are at TW Rauch Beer. As for this show, Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Hall. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'm going to be back again to drink beer and to think beer.